Hey again, it's Mr. Lum, and we're doing another Math 10 video, but this is actually a review from Math 9 to make sure that we're kind of remember a few of these key points so that we're ready for Math 10. Anyways, so we're going to be continuing on with rational numbers and fractions, and we're going to be talking about dividing rational numbers. So I'm going to teach two different methods for dividing rational numbers. The first one I wrote out right here. When you divide fractions, there are two different methods. We're going to learn this first one, and it says find a common denominator, then divide the numerators. I guess I should say the numerators. Last time we spent a little bit of time on finding the denominator. If we can't remember what the denominator is, it is the bottom number. And the numerator is the top number. So we have 9 and 5, and the easiest way to find a common denominator is multiply each of them by the other. So 5 times 9 and 9 times 5. And remember, what you do to the bottom, you must do the top. So I times the bottom by 9 here, so I must do the top by 9, and the bottom was timed by 5, so the top goes by 5. Okay, so 5 times 4 is 20, 5 times 9 is 45. Divide by 1 times 9 is 9, and then 5 times 9 is 45. So, okay, so I've done step 1, I found the common denominator. Then the second part says then divide the numerators. So it's just now it's 20 divided by 9, or in other words, 20 divided by 9. Okay, and that's it. That's your answer, 20 over 9. Okay, now this can be changed into a mixed number. 9 can be taken out of there 2 times. 2 times 9 is 18, and that leaves 2/9 left over. So either one, improper or mixed. Okay. So that's our method 1 for dividing rational numbers or dividing fractions. You can get a little bit of practice here doing it right here. So we'll do the same thing right here. Find a common denominator. Now remember, we could multiply them both by 6 times 3 and 3 times 6, but I can just go like this, times by 2, times by 2. Okay, so I'm going to get negative 5 over 6 divided by negative 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6. So we could multiply them by each other, but that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is to have the smallest common denominator possible. So 6 seems like it's a reasonable choice. We have a negative and a negative, so negative divided by a negative, and so that means it's going to be positive. So we can just go 5 divided by 4. Okay, so 5/4, or you could write 1 and 1/4, or 1 1/4. It's one of those two numbers. Okay. Now this is a lot different than our multiply. So our review from last time is multiplying these numbers right here. And what you do when you have a multiply, you just multiply the tops and then you multiply the bottoms. So this is from last time. 7 times 4 is 28. 8 times 5 is 40. A negative times a positive is a negative. So we're going to keep that negative right there. Okay. So it's negative 28 over 40. Okay. Now this can be reduced, and what we can do is I can see that 28 we can divide both by 4, and so we can say that this is going to be a 7, and this one right here can also be divided by 4. That's a 10. So what I did right here is I divided this by 4, and then divided this by 4. Okay, so I got 7/10. Now it's a negative and a positive, so it still stays negative. So our answer is 7/10. Okay, so that's our first way how we divide rational numbers. our next way for dividing rational numbers is flip the second fraction and then multiply through. So this problem right here is, I'm going to write it again, negative 7 over 9. I'm going to flip this number. So instead of being 1 over 5, it's going to be 5 over 1. And then if I flip that, I flip this and turn it into a times. So this is my new question. So it's a negative number times a positive number, so we know that it's going to be a negative answer. 7 times 5 is 35. 9 times 1 is 9. Okay. Now, we can also change that into a mixed number. And we can probably take out 3 9s from this because 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 4 is 36, and 36 is too big, so we can take 3 9s out of there. So it's going to be negative 3 because we have to keep that negative. Okay, 27. Okay, and so it's going to be 8 9. 8 9s left over. Okay, so it's going to be our answer. I don't know why I have it like this one right here. We can do this multiply one right here, so just multiply straight through. 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 7 is 35. And so that's what our answer would be for this. Now, if it hypothetically said divided by, I think that's what I intended, is to make it say divided by. Then it'd be 2 over 5. And then we have to flip this one, so it'd be 7 over 3. And then we multiply it through. And the 2 times 7 is 14. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, so we see you get way different answers. Okay, so that's our second method for dividing fractions. Most people prefer this flip method, but common denominator method will work completely fine, or this flip method will also work completely fine. Okay. Just to kind of prove that, if here's this one right here, we have 2 over 5 divided by 3 over 7. Okay, so I'll use the common denominator method, and so I'm going to times this. We'll change the color a little bit and go times by 7, times by 7, times by 5, times by 5. And so it'd be 35, 14, divided by 7 times 5 is also 35. So we now have our common denominator. 3 times 5 is 15. We have now 14 divided by 15, or in other words, 14 divided by 15. You get the exact same answer no matter what method you use. It's just two different ways of looking at the same kind of thing. Sometimes you'll find doing this flip method easier. Sometimes if you have larger numbers, sometimes you'll find the common denominator easier. Depends on the problem. You kind of should be using two different methods. Okay, so you may want to be trying to put the video on pause right here and seeing if you can come up with and trying doing these ones yourself. But I'm going to do these as well. So I'm going to use I think I'm going to use the flip method, I guess. Since there are two negatives, it's going to equal a positive number. Okay, 8 times 5 is 40. 9 times 6 is 54. Negative and negative is positive, and so my answer is going to be 40 over 54. And I can take out, well, if you see that they're like both evens, you can start, it might be easier if you just start taking out some divide by 2 kind of thing like this. And so you can get 20 over 27. Okay. And yeah. So our next one right here, we'll also use the flip method, I guess. Negative 7 over 9 times negative 5 over 2. Negative and negative is going to equal a positive number. 7 times 5 is 35. 9 times 2 is 18. So our answer could be 35 over 18 if we want to stick it as a mixed number. We can take an 18 out of that. And so if we go 35 minus 18, we should get 17. And so it'll be, we can only take 1 out of there, and then we're left with 17 18ths. Okay, and that'd be our answer. Okay, a little bit trickier. And what we're going to see here is we have 4 over 9 divided by some number equals 20 over 9. And there's a couple different methods you're using. I'm probably more familiar and more comfortable using that flip method. So essentially, if I'm using that flip method, I'm thinking of, I'm just going to erase these question marks right here, and I'll show you what I'm kind of thinking of. And I'm going to erase this divide sign, but I'm going to remember that I erased this divide sign and come back to it later, and I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to write a multiply sign. So now I'm thinking of 4 times something equals 20. Well, that's going to be 5. And it's going to be 9 times something equals 9. Well, that's easy. That's 1. Okay. Now, I changed it, so now I have to flip it back. Okay. So it's going to be 1 over 5. Okay. So my answer is going to be 1 over 5. Now, I forgot something, and I kind of purposely did because I'm hoping that you caught it too. Our answer is positive, and we have a negative symbol right here. So that means this number must be negative, because a negative and negative equals a positive answer. So our answer is negative 1 over 5. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to flip this and say that, hey, this is going to be a multiply. And I'm going to try to find out a few different numbers right here. So I'm going to say 4 times something equals 20. So 4 times 5 equals 20. And then 3 times something equals 12. Well, it's going to be 3 times 4 equals 12. Okay. Now, again, since I've done that flip method and I multiplied it, flip the sign, I need to flip it back. So it's going to be 4 over 5. Again, negative sign, and this is a positive sign. So this must be, if that's negative and this is positive, this one must be negative. So we're going to stick a negative in front of there. Okay. And that's usually how I do these ones right here.